Well, howdy. We get to talk about a win for the first time in a month. I can't even believe it. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony, and he is John. The Bengals came up big on just an all-around fun but weird Monday night in a lot of different respects. Get a primetime win. You like that, and they did so against, I'm not a marquee team this year, but a traditional marquee team in the Dallas Cowboys. But Bengals keep their slim playoff hopes alive. We'll talk about that a little bit, but do so in pretty dramatic fashion. And then, of course, there was some news that broke, causing us to go a little late for those who like to join us live. Apologize for that, but there's some news that we're going to talk about there. And then, of course, another game for us to preview. I'm Anthony. He's John. John, you are a busy man these days, my friend.
Yeah, man. I guess it was fun to watch because they won, even though outside of like the very end, it wasn't any different than like how these other games kind of go. So yeah, like, I mean, the Cowboys, like you said, are traditionally quote unquote America's team, even though that title has a lot less luster now, but they're kind of just like the NFC Bengals in a sense, and they just kind of find these ways to lose, and they just happen to be the team that make the one play that they couldn't make in order to make that game happen. But a win is a win.
A win is a win. First time in a month that we get to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it because that was not only the game itself was kind of wacky, and there's some players that stepped up this week that hadn't been stepping up, which was good to see in a lot of different respects. And then, of course, the whole Simpsons thing. Unfortunately, a report that surfaced, I believe, today about Joe Burrow and his home being vandalized, etc. That also was, I guess, part of Monday night, if you want to group that terrible situation in with it. But regardless, Bengals come up big and get a win, keep their season alive, so to speak. It's slim, but John, I want to get, again, is this one of those games where you go, well, Dallas is struggling, backup quarterback, I don't know. I mean, they kind of snuck out a few wins, did the Cowboys in recent weeks without Dak. But is this one of those games where you go, hey, because other guys were stepping up, this feels like something that is positive towards a possible playoff push, or just not a very good team and not overall a legitimate win for the Bengals, and still more to be seen with a handful of games remaining?
I guess the positive is the Bengals don't always let backup quarterbacks look like Joe Montana, I guess. I mean, that was the case with Cooper Rush a couple of years ago, but Rush has been starting for a couple weeks now, and he played like a backup more or less. Like, there are obviously situations where the Bengals couldn't cover CeeDee Lamb, and they were easy opportunities for him to kind of dice them up in that regard. But no, the Bengals didn't play a good quarterback, so they only gave up 20 points in that regard. And giving up 20 points with this Bengals offense is typically a winning strategy, until it almost wasn't, because the offense ran into some issues, right? It was really hard to block Micah Parsons in that Cowboys pass rush. Their guards continued to not play like like they need to play in order for them to have, sustainable offense. So I think there are issues on both sides of the ball here. The offense ran into some more consistency issues, despite Burrow and Chase, looking like their normal selves. But yeah, if they are to grind out these wins against some of these bad teams that they have yet to play, they need their defense to play like not the worst unit in the world. And that is what we saw on Monday night. And that could just be because, the other offense was led bad quarterback, but you also had some individual wins from Joseph Asai, from Geno Stone. We can talk about those. So like you did have some plays being made in a vacuum, which is more than what you could have said in past weeks. But is it going to be sustainable against good offenses? I think that definitely remains to be seen.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the I don't know if you'd call them unusual suspects or what with the Bengals and who stepped up this week. I continue to be blown away at a couple of different things, and I guess I'm stating the super obvious here, but Jamar Chase's performance week in, week out is unbelievable. Joe Burrow's performances week in, week out are unbelievable. He did have that interception, but I think pressure kind of caused that one a little bit to sail. Like you said, some interior pressure was getting in there, but it's amazing to me that we are arguably, if not definitively, witnessing the single greatest quarterback and wide receiver statistical seasons in Bengals history, and yet this team is 5-8 and likely not going to the playoffs at this point. It's just this really, really odd dichotomy. And now the chatter, not only with number 5 on the Bengals, but number 1 on the Bengals, both guys, haven't received those long-term contracts. And now this, the more stats, yards, touchdowns, 14 for 177 and 2 scores for Jamar Chase, putting him as one of the NFL's AFC players of the week. And, the Bengals did themselves a bit of a disservice by not getting a deal done prior to the season, because now that price tag just has skyrocketed based on what he has put forth on the field.
And it's not even like he's playing extra hard to get a new contract. This is just him developing as a player. Like, we all knew that he was going to have more opportunities by being moved into the slot, and he was going to have a more opened up route tree. Of course, he ran I think 14, or he had 14 catches on Monday night. 11 of them came on just simple out routes that he and Burrow have been doing since 2018. But yeah, when the Cowboys don't necessarily have a cornerback that can shut him down, and the defense is as suspect as the Bengals usually is, it was a great matchup for him to just be unleashed, and that's just kind of what we saw. So yeah, he is far and away the best receiver in the NFL as of right now, and the numbers definitely state that. And it's fascinating to see how much his game has grown even since that phenomenal rookie year.
Yeah. And again, it's just a shame that the Bengals are 5-8 at this point, witnessing what we've witnessed from those two. Saw some nice plays from Chase Brown here and there. But it was largely Burrow and Chase taking over the game again. And then, of course, the wackiest play, one of the more wackier plays I think I've ever seen, Rico, who's been bombing the ball from the punter position this year, and from that standpoint, playing pretty well, gets one blocked. Then as the scrum for the ball goes, another Dallas player touches it, but doesn't recover it. So then you have 2 Cowboys players technically who have touched it between the block and then trying to get it. So then it's kind of basically a fumble at that point. The Bengals scoop it up, and though they did not advance it past the first down line, it's technically a change of possession at that point. Bengals get it, go down, and of course Burrow and Chase do their thing. And even on that play and other plays, to go back to the Chase Burrow connection thing and routes run, I think they were trying to get at least some of those passes out to avoid the pressure. Some of those balls you could see were thrown. I think one of the touchdowns that was thrown was out before Chase was fully out of his break to the corner. So, they know each other well. I think they're trying to do some things to avoid some of the pressure issues that they are having on the offensive line. But one of the wackier endings that I can remember, just a crazy special teams play that ended up going in the Bengals' favor and potentially, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but potentially saving their season and their playoff hopes.
Look, it keeps the life support on for sure. Leon Lett was before my time, but I don't
I
know.
remember it well.
There was another Cowboys block punt. I think the Broncos blocked. No, the Cowboys got a punt the Cowboys and Broncos played a couple years ago, and like literally the same situation happened where the Cowboys blocked a punt and then they touched it, and then the Broncos retained possession. A lot lower stakes in that game. I think it happened like the first half or something. But of course, we can't gloss over the fact that Nick Vigil, of all people, blocked the punt, right? Former Bengal who was playing his former team for a former defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer. And
time is a flat circle, man.
Right. And of course, Muma Injong Meta, who allows Vigil to get into the backfield to block the punt, he doesn't give up on the play, and he's there to recover the muff by, I don't know the guy's last name. His first name is Amani, but he was a former cornerback for the Lions who ended up being the GOAT of the game. But of course, that whole situation was the Bengals offense has 2 holding penalties, and gave up a sack on 3rd down on a potential game-winning drive, and they were supposed to give the ball back to the Cowboys, and then Cooper Rush is going to lead them to a game-winning drive that led to a field goal at the buzzer. It's the same Bengals game that we've seen over and over and over again. And of course, something that even worse could have happened, where the Cowboys would have an even shorter field, and then of course they just make the mistake that they can't make, and they bungle the game and against the Bungles, I guess, if you're not a fan of the Bengals. So crazy, absolutely nuts.
Crazy. And then even at the end, I mean, Cowboys made it interesting. Down 7, they kind of were driving a little bit, and then Cooper Rush, I mean, to me, that last throw, and there were a couple throws that I felt like, man, he's made those before, and he didn't, that last throw, I think it was on 4th down, kind of sailed it a little bit. But regardless, the Bengals escape with a win. Like you said, I mean, it's crazy to me on the offensive side of the ball, where they're making all these plays, they're doing all of these things, and they're Burrow and Chase are probably going to shatter, franchise records, etc., with from their positional standpoints. But the fact, like you said, they had a point in the game where they've been doing some things, they've been pretty successful, and yet here we could take a stranglehold on this game, and it doesn't happen. It's still, you're putting up the points, you're putting up the yards, you're doing all the things, but sometimes still this offense in critical moments has not stepped up, but did so after the big special teams play. So you got to give them kudos there. And I want to transition a little bit, John, to, some of the maligned Bengals players, some of the guys who have been just not playing good football this year, or inconsistent football this year, stepped up in a big way. I think Cam Taylor-Britt had a couple big plays. Geno Stone, I think, was their highest rated PFF defensive player of the game. He had a tackle for loss. He had the interception off of the Cam Taylor-Britt tip in the red zone. That was a big play, by the way, obviously getting that interception in the red zone. But, you had some others that struggled. Newton had some struggles in this game. You had some struggles from Jordan Battle. Both of them had pretty low PFF scores in this one. But like you said, Osai stepped up after being kind of quiet for a long period of time. I mentioned a couple of others. So it was nice on the defensive side of the ball to see some guys. Yeah, the Cowboys were not at full strength, meaning no Dak Prescott, and, CeeDee Lamb's been battling injuries, and there's all kinds of different things. But it was good to see some players that you didn't expect step up, particularly in the secondary, do some positive things to help the win this week.
If you had like 1 or 2 more of these performances for the defense, the Bengals may have like a winning record at this point.
Yeah,
just because the defense has been so bad. Like in this performance from the defense wasn't great by any means. You saw Rico Dowell looking like prime Marion Barber, like Emmitt Smith out there, right? It was far too easy for him running the ball, and obviously CeeDee Lamb is tough to cover. But like you said, I think Cam Taylor-Britt has been significantly better coming off of the bye week when he was benched against the Chargers. Josh Newton clearly still not there yet on the boundary. But yeah, like Geno Stone just making that play, like the ball just like magically came to him off of like a dropped interception from Taylor-Britt, but just making that one play where in the past there were 0 plays made of that caliber. It added a possession. It took points off the board for the Cowboys. And the fact that the pass rush has been quite literally only Trey Hendrickson for the entire season, to see some clean wins from someone who wasn't number 91. In this case, it happened to Joseph Asai, who was also at 3 technique for some points in this game.
Yeah, he was. He was.
Sam Hubbard didn't have a good game, but he also played less than both Asai and Miles Murphy for the first time all season. So I guess shout out to Sam Hubbard for playing less to give Miles Murphy and Osai on the field a little bit more. And Murphy didn't have like a phenomenal game in terms of the box score, but I thought he, generated some pressure here and there with his bull rushes, and it freed up opportunities for other guys just like Osai. So just having one of those guys step up aside from Hendrickson, who ended up making a crucial sack in the fourth quarter. It was just a handful of plays that just haven't been made in recent weeks. And of course, it makes all the difference because, like you said, this offense, as good as it's been, still doesn't seem to, step up to the plate when it absolutely needed to in the fourth quarter. But sometimes you are able to have a defensive performance where they do step up, and maybe you don't need 34 points to win a game. In this case, that ended up being the case.
It ended up being the case. Marco Wilson had a couple of nice, I think, had 2 pass breakups in this one. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty impressed with him. And DJ Ivy, I think, had a play or two early that was pretty positive. So the Bengals are trying, and Lou Anarumo was doing some different things on defense. I think Trey Hendrickson dropped back into almost like a linebacker / coverage stance at some point. And, did I see that Ivy was kind of playing almost a safety-ish role at some point? So, I mean, there was a lot of different things, and kudos to Anarumo, who's been under a lot of different scrutiny. You don't want to always, pat too hard on the back, giving up 20 points and, this game being a nail biter as it was, but it was one of their better, and it's not saying much, one of their better defensive performances of the year. And he decided to say status quo in a lot of different ways was not working and tried some different things. And to some degree it was successful.
Yeah. Like DJ Ivy, I think, was in the slot a decent amount. Cam Taylor-Britt was also following CD Lamb in the slot. Like Mike Hilton gave up that touchdown pretty early in the game, and I think you saw him being rotated out of the game. Jordan Battle is almost essentially taking over at strong safety over Von Bell at this point. Their last real domino that kind of used to fall at this point is Jermaine Pratt, who looked pretty inept in this game for a lot of it. Like there are a lot of missed tackles, a lot of bad angles. He made a couple good plays in the gap there, but they're kind of struggling at linebacker depth right now. They no longer have Logan Wilson. They no longer have Joe Bacci. So I don't really know where the pivot is for that. Like Pratt still wears the green dot, so I don't really feel like he's coming off the field, but as they've been making adjustments to get other liabilities off the field and give other new guys some chances, I think Pratt is just going to have to tough this out, as I don't really think that they trust anyone else with the communications part. But, he's still capable of decent plays. But I think as there's been so many other adjustments that Lou finally made in this one, that seems to be the one that kind of sticks out as this is probably the last domino to kind of fall.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, and with this Zach Taylor regime, I mean, really, Pratt is one of the longest tenured Bengals at this point. And one of the longest tenured linebackers on this team. With Logan Wilson out, they need someone they can trust to get the plays in and understand what's going on. I think Anarumo went to him, but like you said, maybe it was extra responsibility, all that stuff. But again, this is what it's going to take over the next handful of weeks. The Bengals, struggling Titans team, quarterback situation that's been, fluid and up and down. Same thing with the Browns. Winston will, wing one 80 yards for a touchdown and then also throw 2 pick sixes in a game. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that the Bengals need to just do enough. Just do enough on defense, which they did this week. And you figure that the rest will take care of itself. Mostly Chase and Burrow, a little bit of Chase Brown as well, and T. Higgins as well. And the rest will take care of itself, hopefully. Bengals need to win out. I mean, just briefly about the playoff picture. I just want to shout out Caleb Noe, who put out a nice video about just a nice breakdown of kind of where that last wild card spot. Basically, that's the spot that the Bengals, the 7 seed, the Bengals have the only shot at right now. They are in the back seat of that, but they basically need to summarize. Please go check out Caleb Noe's tweet, but though his video I thought it was well done and just documents it well. They basically need the Dolphins to lose 2, they need the Colts to lose 2, and they need the Broncos to lose 3, essentially, is kind of what it comes down to. And it's down to 4 teams right now, John, including the Bengals. The Bengals need to win out, and then they need some help. So interesting games coming up, because Denver plays Indianapolis, I think this next week, this Sunday coming up here. Bengals play Denver. They do not play Indianapolis. So there's all kinds of moving parts there. Bengals need to win out. They need a lot of help, but There can be some, for lack of better words, kind of cannibalizing of things over the next handful of weeks. Denver's got a pretty tough schedule, depending on your view of the Bengals. They've got the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and I can't remember who else, but they've got a handful of games that is a little rougher than most, I think. Whereas the Bengals have, like I said, the Titans, the Browns, then you've got the Broncos, and then the Steelers. Who knows what they're going to be doing the final week of the season in terms of resting players, etc. So Bengals still have a shot. All they can do is win. That's all they can control at this point. They need a lot of help, but again, if defense does just enough, offense continues this crazy pace that they're on right now, they can do it. It's a matter of if they will do it.
Yeah, it's honestly just crazy just talking about playoffs at this point after the past month, but that is the state of the AFC. You know, there's some new players, I think, in the playoff picture, and a lot of people obviously expected the Bengals to be a part of that, but it is a weird dynamic with how well Burrow and Chase are playing, and the fact that they're going to be, you know, either all pros or in the conversation for player of the year, whatever the case may be, and the fact that they were 4 games out of the playoff picture to now. It's December football, and it's something that this team and this coaching staff have kind of harped on in recent years, and they have to be absolutely perfect now. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We've got a couple more things to talk about. Some big news with one of their star players coming up here, and obviously being a free agent. So we'll talk about that, as well as the Titans game coming up. And the Cincinnati Bengals take on a Titans team with some familiar faces on that squad. But this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, as I mentioned, part of the Believe podcast network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Our guys, Bengal Jim and friends, just had the great Paul Daner Jr. on their program last night. So go check out that episode, as well as all the ones that John and I do on this program. 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick, and the great Willie Lutz. Trying to bring you all kinds of different content, all kinds of different perspectives, and that is available through your favorite audio streamer. You got to go subscribe to the Believe, BLEAV is the spelling of it, in Cincy podcast channel, part of the Believe network. And of course, if you like the video side of things, Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, our YouTube channel, findable underneath John and that Cincy Jungle icon there. Go subscribe, click the bell, do all the things. If you would, we appreciate it. And then on various Twitter accounts, appreciate all of the support. Well, shortly, and this is a reason why we were a little bit late getting started, or later getting started than we usually do. There is a report out there, and I think the major source of this report, credit to her, from Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer, basically say there were some rumblings going forward on Monday evening, which made for an ultra interesting Monday night, where Burrow took I think it was a post-game presser saying, we're going to do everything we can to keep T. Higgins. We want him here long-term. It was kind of like one of those things where you go, okay, that's player speak, but also that's just kind of interesting how that came a little bit out of left field, so to speak. And then a day later or 2 days later, there's like, well, you know, on Athletes First, I believe is if I'm not mistaken, the agency of David Mulugeta and T. Higgins. He's not listed on their roster. By the way, I noticed that a little while ago. Now there is a report from Kelsey Conway that he and Mulugeta have parted ways, per report, and T. Higgins looking for a long-term extension. Quite honestly, I haven't had a lot of time to wrap my head around this, John. I don't know what I make of this. Part of me wants to make this super positive in terms of the Bengals sphere, because this didn't, negotiations went nowhere for the better part of 2 years. He got the franchise tag this year, which he did not want, but credit to T. He showed up, he played, he, did all the things. He's had a pretty decent year this year. I know there's been some injuries, etc., but we know what he can do. We know what he means to this offense. So part of me, between Burrow's comments, between this move and the stalemate between Mulugeta and the Bengals, maybe this means something positive. Part of me is saying maybe it's just more posturing for the offseason, and, he was dissatisfied with not getting the money that he wanted to get from the Bengals and thinks he can get it through someone else, somewhere else. I will say this, and I put this out on a tweet earlier. Going back to the draft class, the 2020 draft class, these two guys, I mean, not only did they play each other in the national championship, they know each other pretty well there. They were at Jordan Palmer's QB summit out in my neck of the woods together, and that's where the rapport began between those guys before the draft. I would not have been surprised. It hasn't really been confirmed, but I'm sure Burrow probably said, hey, if you're going to draft me, you may want to think about drafting this guy. Pretty dang good player. At this point, I don't know. I don't really know what to make of all of this, but I would think that this is better for the Bengals, not great, not overall great for the Bengals.
Well, first of all, you've had this news for weeks and you didn't say anything.
Wait, which one? The 2020? The 2020 deal?
No, that he was no longer listed on the Athletes First website.
Well, I saw that. I did see that, but I didn't know. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't see that. All right. I didn't know what to make of that. I don't know. I guess I do my research, man. I look up,
we could have had the scoop. We could have had the scoop.
Yeah, I guess. Well, that, me, I'm not a clout chaser, man. You know me.
Dan Graziano of ESPN was the first to officially report that on the NFLPA website that Mulligan was now listed as Higgins' agent. Now, no agent is listed or associated with T. Higgins as of this time, but that's when I think all the speculation started today on Wednesday. And then it was Kelsey Conway, like you said, who reached out to a source and confirmed that, yeah, apparently it's the relationship, the partnership has not been a thing for some time. And honestly, after the whole franchise tag deal, they weren't able to negotiate a long-term deal anyways until this offseason. So I'm sure that partnership kind of ended, a while ago because there wasn't really anything that they could do about it. And to me, it just signals one thing for sure, and that is that Higgins was not satisfied with the service that Mulligetta was giving, because it's pretty clear at this point that Higgins wanted to work out a deal with the Bengals. And if he believes that Mulligetta was not the agent to facilitate that deal, then he will look to someplace else. Of course, Mulligetta, known for going after as much guaranteed money as possible for his clients, like that is his whole thing. That's the whole thing with Athletes First. That's why they have a ton of clients in the first place. That's why they break barriers in free agency. And I'm sure that Higgins wanted obviously a lot to do with that, right? That was the appeal of signing him in the first place. But if Higgins' priority is to remain with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase and the Bengals, and stay here where he's been for the past 5 years, and he felt like his current agent was not the guy to get that done, then it makes sense why he would want to go someplace else. So and even with like the Burrow stuff on Monday, when he was asked about it, like I felt it was unfair for him to keep saying these things and keep speaking for the front office, because this is not something that Burrow can actually control. Like he can maybe work around his contract to make it fit, but that shouldn't be something that he's required to do. This is still a Blackburn, a Brown, a Duke Tobin issue at the forefront of it. And it makes me feel bad for Burrow that he has to continue to speak publicly and put his name on these things. But clearly, when he said that he had confidence in the organization figuring something out, it came from some place of knowledge that he knew that like Higgins had changed his agency, and that could be the thing that can restart negotiations here. And I think that's the important thing. I think both sides now can be brought back to say, hey, there's a new facilitator here, there's a new mediator here, there's new representation for Higgins. Let's see if we can try to restart these things, and let's see if there's some common ground that we can find, because clearly there hasn't been any common ground between these two sides in quite some time. So this is the one barrier that has now been kind of blocked or been cleared off for the Bengals to maybe get something done here.
I think that this is, and again, maybe this is just extreme hyperbole on my part again, but I think this is a pivotal moment in the Bengals franchise. What happens here? If for some reason the Bengals are to work out a long-term deal with T. Higgins, not do franchise tag and trade and all the things that have been kicked around here. If we're going to try and connect these vague dots, right? Burrow making these comments going back to 2020 when these two worked out, same draft class, all of these things, the agent change. If we're gonna make the assumption that, hey, this is a posturing to try and work out something long term between T. Higgins and the Bengals, that's a pivotal moment in this franchise, because if you go back and listen to some of Carson Palmer's words and what he was disenchanted with this franchise, lack of free agents, lack of keeping certain players, etc. And you go back to the Jesse Bates thing and not keeping him. If the Bengals are going to commit to doing that and keeping T. Higgins, and then also working on a deal for Jamar Chase, I think that's a pivotal moment where, maybe Joe Burrow does have the ear of the franchise, whereas past franchise quarterbacks did not. Maybe the Bengals are realizing just how important some of these players are, even though they're not the Pro Bowl guy, they are a very important part of, we talked about identity. Is their identity this, pass happy, crazy passing offense? I don't know. I view this as, if the Bengals are going to be able to keep him, I think it's a big if, even with this news. I think it's a big if. I still think this is a pivotal moment in a lot of different ways, in terms of, hey, you know what? We learned from some past mistakes. We learned from kind of being staunch in our ways. We learned from maybe not spending money on players that we should have spent money on and didn't. We're going to do this the right way and build around what we feel our franchise quarterback wants, and keep our championship window open longer. I don't know if you feel the same way about that, but I think this is a very important moment, or series of moments in the franchise's history to kind of set some precedents.
You typically have a good eye for these things, and I feel like you're on point with this as well, because I think it fits exactly how you would describe T. Higgins, where he's not Jamar Chase at the end of the day, and we all feel like 99.99999% confident that Chase is going to, get extended by the Bengals, because that's what the Bengals do with players of that caliber. It hasn't happened yet, but we have confidence it's going to happen with Higgins, because he doesn't have the accolades, because there is an injury history there. Despite him being clearly one of the 3 or 4 best players on the team, there was some reasonable doubt that the Bengals would try to strong arm him and say, hey, you're not this guy, so you don't get to command this type of a price. And there is still, I think, there is a common ground for both sides to find. And maybe this is T saying, hey, I've been here for 5 years, I could go off into free agency and find more money and, whatever the case may be, but I wouldn't be as happy. I wouldn't be with the quarterback that I want to be with. I wouldn't be with, the teammates that I want to be with. And he obviously knows that Burrow and Chase are going to be a part of this for many years to come. And he wants to be a part of that too. I think that's what, more than anything, that is what this says. And if the Bengals are able to work something out with him, obviously it doesn't take Jamar Chase off the table. Any calculations that they would do would include Jamar Chase and all the cash and the cap that would go into that. And this is the same thing that we've been saying for the past 2 years, right? But obviously this whole thing wouldn't be an issue if they just gave Higgins the guaranteed money that he and Mulligata wanted in the first place. So if this is how the situation has to come around, it's not like the Bengals would have changed dramatically, because I would imagine the contract, that if both sides were to find an agreement, it would look very similar to the contracts that they've given out to past players, not named Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase would still be that exception. But progress is progress, I guess, at the end of the day. And this is Higgins trying to make that happen.
I think it is. I think it is a gesture of that. It's now a little bit seemingly on the Bengals, and so that's why I think it's a big move. And I don't want to. There's a team out there that will pay T. Higgins precisely what he wants during the March Madness period of free agency in the NFL here. I think that in a way, though, his injuries and some stuff that happened this year maybe affected that a little bit. And so that's probably where the Bengals are going to default to, as they normally do. But at the same time, they need to realize just when he is healthy, and, if they feel that he's going to be a guy who is healthy for the majority of the seasons going forward, I mean, it's a huge difference maker on the offense when he's healthy and the Bengals have him. But that is big news that hit the wire shortly before we took the air. Reportedly, T. Higgins is moving on from his super agent, David Mulligata, and not really sure. I don't think it's been divulged where he's potentially moving to, but maybe it is a gesture of goodwill to try and get something done long-term, particularly with the comments of Joe Burrow after the game on Monday. Let's talk a little Titans. We're a little tight on time, but We've got so much to get to here. Let's talk a little Titans here. The Bengals go to Tennessee to take on Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans. They have been struggling this year. Got a couple of wins, but I mean it's been tough going for him. And the relationship between he and Will Levis kind of hit different levels. I mean, reportedly, it kind of hit some different levels of ire or whatever. I don't know whatever you want to call it, but this is the first game in a series of games that the Bengals could win and sneak into the playoffs, but this won't be easy. There are still despite the record, there are still some good players on that Tennessee team, particularly ones that can give their offensive line fits.
That's true. Jeffrey Simmons is still there. I believe he had a rest day today at practice for Wednesday. Revenge is going to be a pretty common theme for this one as well. Tyler Boyd, Cheeto Wuzier, now Tennessee Titans, going to play the Bengals for the first time. Brian Callahan's going to coach against his former team for the first time. The Bengals last played in Tennessee last year, and they got their doors blown off of them when Boyd, Wuzier, and Callahan were all still with the Bengals. But I think I disagree with you a little bit. I think this game should be more significantly easier than the Dallas game because I think the Tennessee Titans are just not very good. Like I genuinely think that the Bengals, as bad as they've been, are better in pretty much every important facet. Obviously, the passing game is better. The Titans defense is pretty much just as bad as the Cowboys. And I do agree, like there are players that will definitely get some wins and will cause, we'll have advantageous matchups against the Bengals. But I think after last week, when they beat the Cowboys basically off of luck, off of a very lucky play, that can't be the case this week against the Titans. If you want to be considered like a true contender for the playoffs by winning on everything, I think they need to beat the Titans pretty convincingly. And obviously all wins count the same, but just looking at what this Titans team has been this year, the fact that their quarterback is an erratic mess that clearly his head coach does not trust at all. Like, this is the opportunity for the Bengals to build off of what they did last week. And if they don't, I think it says more about the Bengals than anything else.
It's an interesting take because, man, so you're kind of looking for, I don't know if style points is the right word, but I mean, you're looking for something pretty convincing in order for this momentum to potentially carry over and sneak into the playoffs. That's kind of your sign a bit this week, if I'm hearing you correctly.
100%. And I get it. The Bengals I don't consider them a good team. Like, they have arguably the best drop back passing game in the league, but like the Titans they just do not move the needle for me one iota. Outside of like a couple of star players, like they are just by and large just a worse team than the Bengals. And I would say the only thing like it's hard to win in Tennessee. I think it's a tougher place to win than people give it credit for, but obviously that year has not really held up because, again, the Titans are just not good. And I think a lot of their offseason plans from this year have not panned out. Like, their offensive line is still not good despite having Bill Callahan coach it with JC Latham, their first round pick, starting at left tackle. It's just not been good. It's been worse than what the Bengals have been dealing with. This is arguably, I think, their easiest game for the remainder of the schedule.
So the injury report, the names are far less than the Tennessee Titans in terms of the amount of guys on the Bengals injury report, but again, still some important players. Orlando Brown did not practice Wednesday with the fibula injury. Joe Bacci, you mentioned he's been having some issues. Of course, you figure there's going to be rest for Burrow. They are seemingly doing a little bit of the same now with Higgins because of the soft tissue injuries that he has suffered throughout the year here. So he was limited on Wednesday, but Charlie Jones again did not practice. And then what in the world? I just hope Sheldon Rankins is okay at this point. Yeah. I mean, I don't know I don't know if that's mono. I don't know if I don't want to be like super dive into his super private life, but I mean, I would assume if they keep him on the active roster, I would assume and hope that it's not something like life threatening or something at this point, but this is like a month-long illness issue that he has had. I hope he's okay at this point. I know that's been a super disappointing signing for the Bengals, but at this point, just from a humanity standpoint, I just hope he's all right.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to speculate what it could be, but clearly it's a very like
Totally.
it's an illness that would keep you away from work at your job for weeks on end. Like
Yep.
obviously like pneumonia could be something like that. But we're not going to try to speculate as to what it is, but it's clearly something that it's pretty serious for sure.
Well, here's by the way, this is Johnny Bangle. We I know we
What's up, Johnny?
follow him on. Yeah, what's going on, man? We haven't heard from him for a while. How scared of you are of this Titans interior pass rush versus our interior offensive line? John, I'm going to let you kind of take a lead on this because I know you posted some good videos. I think it was unfortunately indicting on Alex Kappa mostly about the Bengals interior offensive line. I mean, I don't know. What do you this to me, this is really the only way that the Titans can secure a win. This is the only way. If they're just able to wreak havoc that way, get Burrow off of his game and have him play a game that is, you look, if you were to look like his game by game stats, you go, what happened there? That's the only way I can kind of see the Bengals losing this one. And it is kind of realistic. It seems like.
Yeah, because it's 100% is where the Titans are the strongest. Like Jeffrey Simmons is still Jeff Simmons. Devondre Sweat looking really solid as a rookie. You kind of wonder how that would have gone if the Bengals ended up drafting him, but I don't think they could have because he went before them in the second round. So that's a really strong defensive tackle duo. Alex Kappa's not getting it done. He just doesn't have the athleticism anymore. Cordell Wilson's been benched. Now it's back in the starting lineup, and he's still the same guy. So like that, I mean, yeah, that playoff game when they gave up 9 sacks, like the majority of it came from just twists and stunts from the interior, and there was no room for Joe to step up. And obviously last year, when he was dealing with his calf injury, like his mobility just wasn't there. So he was a sitting duck against that almost the same defensive line in terms of the personnel grouping. So it's definitely where the Titans have the advantage, and it's where that they can definitely cause this offense some issues. I still look at like the Bengals defense versus the Titans offense, and it would just stun me if the Titans were able to score more than like 17 points, which is why, the Bengals offense may stall a little bit, but again, against like an average defense, you expect this offense to score 30 points, which, by the way, that's all like I think people have wanted over the past couple of years for the offense to get to this level. And of course, it's now the defense on the other side of the pendulum. So that's really, I think, where my confidence comes from. The Bengals may only score like 23 points here because the Titans are stalling some drives because of that interior pass rush, but I still don't think it's going to matter.
So we talked about it last week, and we unfortunately did not mention him in the guys who stepped up that you didn't expect to potentially step up against the Cowboys. Cade York kicked hey, you know what? Did what he was supposed to do, right? Did what he was supposed to do. And in that, what did he have? 2 field goals and 3 extra points, right? So at this point, I'm curious now. Now that's in the comfort of a dome. I'm very curious. It's going to be probably cold as hell, right? In Nashville, I would think. It gets that frosty, not really like, oh, nice fluffy snow. It's like that slushy, cold, you're kicking a cinder block of a football type of thing. So this week, I'm curious to see what he does, because I think, maybe I don't want to sell the Bengals offense short, but points may be a little bit more at a premium this week because of either what Johnny brought up with the interior pass rush of the Titans, and or just December weather. Your kicker is going to need to be able to kick in the elements. That is what has marked Evan McPherson's career. Aside from being able to hit long kicks, he's been able to kick in the elements for the most part. You don't have him yet. A nice game from Cade York last week. Again, one of those kind of wild stories. His girlfriend's a cheerleader on the Dallas Cowboys, which was like, wow, okay, that's kind of crazy. But regardless, I think that's a big story this week and a big key for the Bengals. I don't like to rely on a kicker, particularly one that comes in late in the season, but I mean, you can't deny it that you're going to need to be able to rely on a player like that to be able to get you some points.
Yeah, my Cade York take was dismantled upon learning that his girlfriend was going to be on the field for his first game back. I did not account for that, and of course, that's why I think every extra point was boomed over the net. Of course, you're going to kick
Yeah, was he
150% more
peacocking a
power.
little bit? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
like of course he's got his girl watching him in his first game back under a national audience. Of course, he's going to kick like crazy. But now I'm of the opinion that he's still Cade York. So unfortunately, I wish he played the Cowboys every week for that reason.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. But yeah, I mean, and on the Bengals side, again, we talked about it earlier. I think it's going to take, whether it's the same kind of unlikely heroes or others, I think it's going to take some guys that have, not really pulled their weight on defense to come up big this week, whether that is, our beloved Sam Hubbard, who's been on our team or on our show, numerous times and has been, nothing but gracious to us and has been a great Bengal over the course of his career, whether it's him, whether it's getting some interior pass rush and doing some different things, because I don't think Rankins is coming back anytime soon at this point, based on what I'm seeing there, that you're going to need to find some different things there. Whether it is getting Joseph Osai going, whether it is some of these young secondary players or a guy like Geno Stone. I mean, you're going to need to probably net a couple of turnovers, I think, on defense at this, I would think, based on their stopping or not stopping wacky punt situations, all kinds of different things. You're going to need to get kind of, I would think, a couple of those things to go your way. Despite the Titans having a talent disparity, I just think it's a tough atmosphere. There's kind of some matchup things I don't like. I don't know. I think the Bengals win this one. I don't know if you want to let's get into predictions. I think the Bengals win this one, potentially by a possession or more, but I don't think it's overly pretty. I don't think it's overly comfortable, but I do think they kind of ride some momentum from this last game.
I mean, if they need turnovers, I think they picked the right quarterback to face, because Will Levis turns the ball over in the most hilarious ways I've ever seen.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
He can sling it for sure, and he has against pretty bad defenses. So yeah, this is still the Bengals defense at the end of the day, and I think Will Levis will have opportunities to maybe pick them apart a couple of times. Again, though, like if we are really doing this whole like Bengals are still in the playoff race, like if we're really still taking them seriously at this point, they have to beat the Titans, and they have to look like the better team doing so. So that's just kind of where my mind is at this point. If they're going to ride this momentum and get their first second straight win of the season, I do expect it to happen this week. I expect the Bengals to win something like 20, like 26-16.
Okay. I think that's pretty reasonable. I think also this is what's interesting to me, even though he's got a year of pro experience on him. I see more disciplined play out of Bo Nix, but I do still see that same, hey, I'm fitting this in here, and it's turnover or, just kind of like, wait, what was that play, man?
Say Nix or Levis?
Well, I'm saying Bo Nix a couple of weeks down the road.
Oh,
with the Denver Broncos. I see some of the same similarities with Will Levis, where it's this, hey, I mean, great throw, where, awesome play. But then there's that one, what were you seeing there? Right. That just kind of that one or two plays in a game where you go, what were you seeing there? Will Levis seems to show that propensity of the WTF moments more so than Nix, but just looking forward, I don't want to look past this game necessarily, but just looking forward a couple of weeks. I think you have a similar type of player in a way where you go, okay, there's going to be some amazing throws, and there might be the opportunity to turn the game a different direction because of one or two decisions from the quarterback.
Right. And I think what also plays the Bengals' favor, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of athleticism on this Titans offense. Like Calvin Ridley is not necessarily the same guy as he's been. If Tyler Boyd does play in this game, and I don't know because I don't know how injured his foot is, like he's obviously like there are reasons why the Bengals moved on from him. Tony Pollard, I think, is still up there in terms of rushing yards, so he's having a pretty decent year, but that offensive line is not overly athletic. If there's ever a time for this Bengals defense to not look like, they're second rate in terms of speed out there, like it would be in this game. And it's good, like you said, it's going to be cold. The game's going to be kind of slowed down a little bit in that regard. So there's definitely opportunities for this defense to build momentum. And if they don't, again, that is just it raises even bigger red flags than what we had in recent weeks.
Yeah. Well, we both think the Bengals are going to be successful this week and get to 6-8. And then they've got the Browns on tap, and then the Broncos, and then the Steelers. Obviously, I mean, they get more and more important as the year goes on, but 2 divisional games and then another one where you're jockeying for that final wild card spot there with the Broncos. This last month is pretty important here. But let's drop the mic and get on out of here. We've gone through a lot of different stuff. John Sheeran, what do you got for us on our way out of the program?
I guess the bigger news that broke, other than T. Higgins' agent switch, was Bill Belichick coming back to coaching North Carolina college football, which had been reported for the past couple of days by Ollie Connolly. So shout out to him for being ahead of the news. But there was the whole thing about how there was an agreement in place, and Belichick had presented the Tar Heels with like a 400-page organizational Bible and about how everything that they need to change in order for him to fit in the environment. And I was just thinking, because Belichick had been a name brought up, if the Bengals were to move on from Zach Taylor, would the Bengals be interested in Bill Belichick? I can't imagine how a meeting would go between Belichick and the Blackburns and the Browns and said, hey, here's 400 pages about what you do is archaic and wrong. And we need to instill a Patriot way here. I can't imagine how quickly that Bible would be thrown into the trash.
Yeah. Or thrown back at him.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the two. But I do think coaching in Cleveland, I mean, I think Belichick does have, and if you've watched, a Football Life or anything like that with the Paul Brown thing, I think Belichick has a reverence for Paul Brown, and,
sure.
and I mean, there's a respect there, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think to your point, I do think Zach Taylor came in not with a quote unquote Bible, but I think Zach Taylor came in with an organizational plan, and the Bengals said, wow, this is an impressive young guy. I mean, you've seen how Zach carries himself in the media and everything. I mean, this is an impressive young guy. He's confident. He knows UC. He's been in this city. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of, and then he comes in probably with a nice, a plan that's aligned with their vision in a lot of ways, but probably, differentiates just enough, right, to say, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. And so that resonated with them. But yeah, I don't see whether or not Zach Taylor makes it into next year. I don't see a scenario where the Bengals bring in someone. I mean, look at their coaching history, dude. I mean, look at it. It's either, Forrest Gregg, former, Packer, and was affiliated with the Bengals. Sam Weish, right? I mean, you look at this, they either promoted from within or they took chances on, Marvin Lewis. They took chances on, there were guys that they know. There were guys that they were familiar with, or guys that they were giving their first chance to in a lot of different ways. So I don't see someone, your Parcells, your Rex Ryans, your Bill Belichick, someone with these big personalities coming in here and trying to throw their weight around. I don't see that happening. I thought, now that I look at the success he has had in Seattle, I thought, Mike McDonald would have been, someone that would have been a perfect, hey, Ravens guy, young guy, sharp. That would have been like that mold right there is like exactly who the Bengals would go for if they went outside. Otherwise, they would look internally. That's just my take on it. Again, I don't want to harp on it a lot, but just want to give a thought to Joey B, man. That's just like, you go and you try and enjoy a win, and freaking house gets broken into. And like he said today, I'm not even going into all the details, but just feels personally violated. Privacy is violated in a lot of different ways. And I understand that. I just feel bad for him. And unfortunately, this is kind of becoming a little bit of a theme, it sounds like, with some athletes as they people track this stuff and they find out when they go out, and I don't know, man. I don't get the mindset. I don't get what happens there, but hopefully Joe gets the help, recovery, all the thing. All that stuff, because that is not a fun scenario at all for him to endure at this point. And again, you're trying to come off of a win, a win that just keeps your season barely alive, and you're
on his birthday.
Smashing donuts in your buddy's face, all that kind of stuff. Speaking of the donuts, did you watch the Simpsons thing?
I had it on my computer.
We didn't really talk about it.
I had it on my computer in the beginning of the game, and this is when I realized that it was 3 plays behind. So when CD Lamb it
was behind.
CD Lamb cooked Mike Hilton out of his shoes, I got to watch it happen on The Simpsons. Like, damn, that was embarrassing.
Yeah. I thought it was clever. Thought it was a little weird, but I thought it was clever. They tried something new, whatever. All good. But like I said in the last episode, I grew up watching The Simpsons, so that was kind of nostalgic. I had my oldest son was kind of watching it on the other. He was kind of interested, of course, because it was like cartoon, but he was like, "What is this?" He was like, "Well, I don't really understand what this is here." And then finally we put on the other game, but interesting stuff there with the Simpsons thing. Did you see their Chris Collinsworth celebration on the Manning cast?
Yeah.
I don't want to keep. I'm hogging the drop the mics session here, but I posted a video and people are like, "Yeah, cool," but other people are like, "Dude, the guy's a hater." I don't think he actually hates the Bengals. I think he is paid to be objective. I think that poor guy, dude. Since he's been on Sunday Night Football, he's witnessed one Bengals win, 2 maybe. Since he's been on Sunday Night Football on NBC, I think he's starved for them, and I think he's probably like, "Man, this team, they're just snake bit," and people aren't enamored with the fact that he's not sitting here, patting the Browns on the back and Burrow. He's objective, and I think sometimes some of these guys who played for a specific team, they almost default to being overly objective, and that's maybe what he does. I don't know. I respect him. I think he's amazing at what he does, and he's a good football player for the Bengals too.
Yeah, like there was I remember it wasn't too long ago when the Bengals were really good that people said, "Oh, the Bengals get boosted PFF grades because they're based in Cincinnati and the boss is a former Bengal." So like it's been both sides of the spectrum, I guess. But yeah, you're right. I never thought that Collinsworth was biased against the Bengals. I thought he did a good job of kind of remaining down the middle. Now he gets slandered. Maybe not slandered because it has happened a lot, but his infatuation with Patrick Mahomes because the Chiefs are always on Sunday Night Football. So now he deals with he's just idolizing obviously the best quarterback in the game, and he's trying to balance all that out. So that seems to be what I associate Collinsworth with now, because he doesn't do a lot of Bengals games recently. But yeah, I've never had that opinion of Collinsworth.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, let's get out of here. We both predicted a win against the Titans for the Bengals here. Hopefully that rings true, and hopefully they get the help that they need for the playoff picture. John, thank you for all your insight, buddy. Appreciate you coming on. I know we've had a lot to go to do this evening with the news that broke and everything, but appreciate you. Appreciate all of you tuning in live. We got a lot of people tuning in live. Go check it out after the fact on your favorite audio streamer on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You got to resubscribe to that. BLEAV on your favorite audio streamer. Leave us a review and go like, subscribe, do all the things on YouTube. We appreciate all of you. Take care. We'll be back with more on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast and on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Take care.